Hi Sam, very good to see you. Obviously, I was really keen to talk to you because you've got a startup business. It's one that's really interesting. We met about a year ago when you were really at the very beginning of your journey. You trialed a bit. You had something you built for incredibly little amount of money from memory, but had it working and got it up and going. And at the time, you were looking for investment and sort of rebranding, which I know you've done. And because of the environment we're living in, I was just really fascinated about kind of what's been happening for your business. Because I've seen you still putting things out. I know you're still active. I know the journey's going, but I'm sure there have been some bumps over the last kind of 4 months. So perhaps you could sort of describe what StudentWorks is as the kind of the concept, and then we can dive into a bit of the challenges you've had.
Yeah, so I'm Sam, one of the founders of StudentWorks. So we connect local businesses and people with the student workforce. So we have a communication channel, essentially. So whenever you need an extra pair of hands, whether that's doing some data entry, some office admin, through to coming around and cutting your grass, then you get a local student to come and help you. It's definitely been an interesting journey. We kind of spent the last, almost since we last met, actually, or initially met about a year ago, up until the beginning of this year, we finally raised some money and have been rebuilding our whole sort of technology platform, and then started pushing it out at the beginning of this year. So it was quite a short but intense period. So it was about 6 to 8 weeks where we pushed it out there. We started getting some really good initial traction, actually mainly focused in the hospitality sector. We've been part of an accelerator program down in Southampton, linked with the university there, and we were sort of been playing around with our business model and finding that beachhead that we were going to attack first, and identified the hospitality sector as the place to go for. So we pushed it out the beginning of this year into that space and started getting some really good feedback when it all kind of it fell off a cliff about a week before it was the week before the 20-something of May mark, and it all just kind of died. So it's it's a startup. We always expected there to be a few speed bumps and sort of it'd be an interesting journey. Not necessarily, hasn't gone quite as planned initially, but it's been a really good learning curve actually for us. And we were fortunate, I suppose, in a sense that where we are still pretty young and small, we can move quite quickly. And although we had a plan of action in place, we've been able to just sort of move and adapt. So for example, obviously remote working's become big. We'd always planned to build in remote working features to enable students to be hired for remote work. But we didn't really think we were probably going to do that for another 6-9 months. But all of a sudden there was a pretty urgent call to the developers saying, look, how quickly can it be done? Let's get it in place. Likewise, we always wanted to work in the charity space, and students, having lots of conversations with students, you suddenly realize that they're often really keen to work with charities because it's an opportunity for them to do some really interesting work and have responsibility that they may not otherwise have had if they've been paid to do it, because I suppose you give people more opportunity. It's a bit more of a more risk-free environment when there's no paid work or paid financial exchange. And so we were always planning to get heavily involved in the charity sector because that's what the students were asking for. But we've just moved up some of those features. So we've now got like Help for Heroes type button available on the site where people can go on and find student volunteers quickly and easily, which actually it's been fantastic. We've had a really positive response. The students have loved it. Local people, businesses have also been able to get help doing digital marketing through to those have been the stories I think we've all heard.
Obviously there's kind of voluntary work there. Have you been able to move into stuff where you know, students have still been able to sell services and earn some money, because with so many people's, you know, on furloughed or jobs at risk, that was one of the things I was kind of wondering about your model. Is there still actually a demand for that kind of student workforce at the moment?
Yeah, it's slow. It's definitely slower than it was, and we were starting to see, but it has been out there. It's just not necessarily in the floods and waves that we would maybe have liked, and what we anticipated coming pre this whole COVID situation. Within the digital marketing space, it's been quite surprising. I've noticed there's been a real pickup actually in people. Everyone needs to sell now more than ever, and we've particularly been focusing on getting both sort of small businesses, independent consultants, etc., using students to build their sales and marketing lists for them. It's kind of something we saw where a few people had tried to get students to do it, and we thought actually that makes a lot of sense. And so we've really been pushing that recently, and that has been working, where we've had a lot of students being hired and being paid to do it, to basically just do sales and marketing work, and a lot of the grunt work for these small businesses, where also actually some of these companies, they've had to furlough their staff, which is awful, but some of that work, it still needs to be done, and you're in this awkward situation where you can't get the member of staff that's furloughed to do it, and it's more cost effective just to pay a student for, say, 1 day out of the month to do it. So we have been fortunate in that respect, that there is that a little bit of demand still out there. And then for us as well, we've managed to get involved in the Feed the Nation campaign as well in the agricultural industry, which was something we never really thought would get involved in. But we read an article actually, one of our advisors sent it through, about a lettuce farm in Essex needing 1,500 workers. So the cheesy email went out to them saying, let us help you, and which we were embarrassingly proud of.
Do we send it? Don't we send it?
Yeah, Rohan, my business partner, sent it through on WhatsApp, and it was a low point of a Tuesday afternoon, and you think, no, let's do it. We'll send it out. But that's been great, because students have been really keen to get involved in that, and it's actually been a real positive from not just this COVID situation, but moving forward in managing to identify a whole new market that we hadn't even considered long term, where students can earn really good money doing it. But this problem with the Feed the Nation campaign and getting workers onto farms, it's not actually new. It's been highlighted more in the media this year, because I suppose it has sort of been a slow news month.
Sure.
But it happens every year, and it's been happening year on year out for at least the last 5 or 6 years. And we've been fortunate to be able to have conversations with people within that industry that probably in a normal circumstance wouldn't be able to have those sort of such high level conversations with those bigger bodies. We've been able to get in, have those conversations, and now looking forward, they're quite keen to sort of work with us, and we're keen to work with them to see how we can have a sort of a more robust process in place moving forwards, because this campaign's been brilliant this year, and it's worked, but how can we work with farmers to really, I suppose, help them do some gap planning? They're big businesses, but they're permanently struggling to get staff, and universities are keen to get their students onto farms. We're keen to help get students onto farms. They're keen to work on farms, and the farmers need them. So it's been a really interesting conversation and time from that respect as well, just in highlighting industries that maybe we hadn't thought about or weren't planning to get involved in, but at a sort of a far higher level as well, which has been great.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it sounds like you've kind of got some things that are quite short-term responses that might not become kind of integral parts of the business, and other things that might be taking you down sort of a long-term. I mean, with agriculture, I can see the seasonality of students and the kind of demand in agriculture. There's a really nice match there, isn't there, in terms of when they want people and when students are available. So yeah, I hadn't really considered that element of, yeah, sort of short-term responses and then long-term changes of direction. Are there things that you think are, have fundamentally shifted your thinking about the future of the business? You might not even be there yet in terms of knowing what those will be, but
I think it was for us. It's probably still too early to say, because it was only sort of a few months of traction, sort of really solid traction that was giving us any real data to go off. So I think it's too early to say. We still anticipate working quite heavily with the hospitality industry, as we plan to do anyway, because it's a space where, as you mentioned, it's quite a lot of it's quite seasonal work that works nicely with students, but also they just need a large volume of individuals to work all the time. And our business model does evolve around industries that need a lot of people. So that hasn't changed. I think it's going to be, it will just be interesting really how the next few months plan out and how quickly things open, which will determine whether or not that's something we still want to stick with. It's still too early to say.
And this is one that you kind of might not want to answer, but have you, because you obviously got investment, have your investors have been sort of understanding and supportive of the shifts you've had to make? I'm kind of quite interested in that element.
Yeah, we were fortunate. So because of the nature of our investment, a lot of it was tied up in our sort of developers as well, and then some equity initially. So it was it wasn't a huge amount. They have been very understanding, which definitely helps. I think it's the sort of situation where you're having those conversations and they're realizing that actually there is no way of anticipating this. No. And as long as we can actually just be quite sensible and really limit sort of cash flow down to the bare bones. In some respects, I think as a startup, and I imagine quite a lot of startups in a strangely fortunate and privileged position in some respects, where you're very used to having very little cash anyway. So it doesn't make you try not to spend money. Well, we're not having to make sort of real drastic shifts into the way we're doing things to save money, because we've always had that mentality and we're still very lean. But also because that investment has come in, actually we're, from a cash standpoint, we're in quite a positive and strong position. So really a lot of it's just been about being patient and just waiting and getting everything ready so that we can press that play button and grasp some of those opportunities when the time does come, and not trying to force things now and potentially burning through some of that cash that would be far better spent in a couple of months' time when things do go ahead. So yeah, we've been lucky. I've had that support from the investor network, but also to be in a position of, I suppose, a bit of power and control to decide when we get going again. That's been very, very fortunate, actually. I think it will be interesting to see sort of what happens in the next 6-9 months in both the startup space, but also will some of these startups suddenly be able to grow and scale far quicker and take some of the place of some of those already established small, medium-sized businesses, just because they are lucky to have sort of a bit of cash in the bank, and they've not actually had to necessarily change the way they're thinking that much, because they're working from a pretty blank canvas anyway, which makes it easier in some respects.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point, because there's I know quite a few people that I've been speaking to recently, and the people that are used to working from their kitchen table and, you know, watching every penny with a hawk, even quite sort of chunky sized businesses, you know, doing quite good turnover, they've still got that mentality of not spending too much money and being pretty agile. I think they're quite well placed. Whereas if you've got an office lease and half a dozen cars leased for directors and all those sorts of things, it's really painful. And you spend the whole time kind of focused on those cash issues rather than thinking about what do we need to do with our products and services to bring some new money through the door. So I agree with you completely. I think anybody in your position could be, in a very interesting place when we're kind of 6, 9, 12 months out from now. Do you get a feel for kind of where people are in their sort of journey at the moment?
It's been generally, this sort of sounds a bit bizarre in some respects, and I don't know whether, I suppose I'm fortunate in some, I'm still quite young, and a lot of the people I speak to within the startup space are that sort of younger. Quite often they're living on their own, or they haven't got children and things like that, so which does make a big difference to the way you're working and your life in general. But the general consensus has been actually relatively positive from if you're in that startup space, trying to push things out at this moment in time with the government grants that have become available, just the ability to drive forward in quite people at this moment in time. I think people are very open to change, and when you're trying to sort of disrupt in an industry anyway, that makes life a lot easier. You're going in and trying to sell something that's a bit different anyway, so you've got customers that are more open to change. Customers a lot of the time have got more time to speak to you. Some of the bigger players that you've always wanted to work with are now suddenly saying, "Oh, go on then, I'll have a chat," or giving you a seat at the table, where 6 months ago you'd have rattled off 10 emails, made 10 phone calls, and got turned down every time by a PA. Now you're getting to them directly and having those conversations. So it's been quite a positive feedback from the people I'm speaking to, also in that startup space. I mean, a good friend of mine's actually just raised sort of their initial round of investment during this whole COVID crisis, and sort of just shy of £1 million coming into the bank account, going through all of the terms and term sheets and all of the legals through Skype, but the investors were still happy to put the money in. And actually, possibly, I kind of got a strange suspicion that actually investment might almost be ever so slightly easier to come by in the next 6 to 9 months, where people are actually going to be willing to take a little bit of a risk, because if you've got a bit of cash flying around, you're going to struggle to make it work in more traditional investments with low interest rates, etc. So with some of the EIS and SEIS options still on the cards or on the table, people potentially might be able to be a bit more risky and or risk averse and go for it.
No, it's really interesting. I mean, this is kind of exactly kind of why I was keen to talk to you, to get from this perspective, because it's very different to a lot of the things that I'm involved in. But I agree with so much of it, and I think there are deals that will be done in the sort of now and over the next few months that just wouldn't have been possible a year ago, because, like you're saying, you wouldn't have got to speak to the right person, or the terms would have been, these are the terms, take it or leave it. Whereas now they're like, well, let's give it a try and see where we go and things like that. So I think it's really cool that you can get speaking to the right people and get some things done. Really, I think it's quite good. And on the investment side, I completely agree, because when you've got the traditional equity market, which is just the stuff of nightmares at the moment, And if people haven't, if people didn't cash in sort of in February, it's too late. You've just got to sit and look at your losses and ride it out and hope you don't need to spend the money for another 5 years. Whereas if people have got cash, and SEIS and EIS just minimize the risk hugely. And I think people will be, open-minded to new solutions to problems in a way that they haven't been before. So it's really good. And really, really positive to hear what you're saying. And you've, I think, answered a lot of the kind of queries I had in my mind about what you've been able to do. And overall, it sounds pretty exciting and positive.
It's all things considered. There's, I think it's a startup. You have restless and sort of sleepless nights regardless, and there's always good days and bad days. But I think probably maybe that's just my personality anyway. You always look for the light at the end of the tunnel and those opportunities. And if anything, there's probably more opportunity out there now than ever in our space. It's just about tailoring the solution. And I think maybe the fact as well that we're in a very fortunate position to help, and if we can help as many people as possible, both from a business perspective and a personal perspective, then we can really use that to our advantage and build a reputation, and hopefully just think more long term. And it's been, all things considered, it's been a pretty positive positive couple of months. Maybe if slower in terms of revenue, but probably faster in terms of general overall company growth. So can't complain too much.
Excellent. Well, it's been really good to speak to you, Sam. It's been good to sort of catch up after a long time and not talking to you, because yours, I know we never ended up doing any work together, but when I first met you, I just thought, firstly, I thought it's a really good idea, and then secondly, I could see you personally sort of making it work and persevering. So it's really great to hear that you got the investment, that backing is still very much there, and that you found opportunities. And I think flexible work is going to be with us for ever now, is my suspicion. That phrase will probably come back and bite me now, but I think it just will be. And you're in there kind of early and doing the right thing, so it's really good, really good.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, thanks for taking the time, Chris. Much appreciated. And look forward to sort of hopefully be able to catch up again soon with more good news.
Excellent.